The chandelier lights shimmered across the banquet hall, casting golden ripples over crystal glasses and perfectly folded linens. I stood in the middle of it all, trying to keep my hands from trembling as I adjusted the ivory dress I had picked for the rehearsal dinner. Tomorrow was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Tomorrow, I was going to marry the man I thought was my forever, Daniel. But tonight the universe revealed its cruel joke. I pushed open the side door leading to the bridal suite, expecting to find my sister, Lauren, helping with last-minute decorations like she had promised. Instead, I froze, my breath caught in my throat as my eyes fell on the scene unfolding before me. Daniel, my fiancé, and Lauren locked in an embrace that was anything but innocent. Her manicured fingers pressed against his chest as if she owned him, his lips hovering dangerously close to hers. The laughter spilling from them was soft, intimate, the kind of laugh Daniel once shared only with me. I wanted to scream, to collapse, to tear the walls down around us. But instead, my feet rooted to the floor, and my heart shattered silently, piece by piece. Lauren turned her head first, spotting me in the doorway. Her smile didn't falter. No, she leaned closer to Daniel, her voice dripping with poison. Oh, you weren't supposed to see this so soon, sis. Daniel pulled away, guilt flashing across his face, but not enough guilt to undo what I had just seen. It's not what you think, Claire. He stammered, but even he knew how pathetic it sounded. I swallowed the lump in my throat, blinking back tears that threatened to drown me. Not what I think? Daniel, I'm your fiancé. And you're kissing my sister the night before our wedding. The room seemed to spin. The sound of laughter from the rehearsal dinner outside felt distant, muffled. All I could hear was the thunder of betrayal pounding in my chest. And in that moment, standing there in the ruins of my trust, one thought crystallized in my mind like icy: they weren't going to get away with this. If you've ever dreamed of serving justice to someone who wronged you, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready, because this is one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll ever hear. Daniel reached out as if touching me could erase the truth, but I stepped back, clutching the doorframe for balance. Lauren's smirk widened, her voice taunting. Face it, Claire. You've always been second best. Daniel deserves someone better. Her words burned deeper than the betrayal itself. For years she had mocked me, belittled me, overshadowed me in every way. But stealing my fiancé, that was war. I forced a smile, though my insides were collapsing. You're right, Lauren. Daniel deserves exactly what he's getting. And trust me, I whispered, locking eyes with her. He will. She laughed, certain of her victory. But she had no idea that in that very moment, I began plotting the revenge that would break her heart. Not tomorrow, not next week, but in front of everyone who ever believed her lies. People say family is supposed to be your safe place, the one constant you can always fall back on. But for me, family was a stage, and I was always the supporting act to my sister's star role. From as early as I can remember, Lauren was the golden child, the one who shone the brightest in every room, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. She was born 2 years after me, but somehow she was always steps ahead in their affection. When I brought home an A on my science project in fifth grade, Dad nodded and said, Good job, Claire. When Lauren brought home a B the same week, he clapped and declared, Well, she's our little artist. Not everything has to be about grades. Then he put her drawing on the fridge. Mine ended up in the drawer. It became a pattern. If Lauren stumbled, there was always an excuse, always a soft landing. If I stumbled, I was reminded that I should have known better. I still remember my 12th birthday party. I had begged for weeks to have my friends over, to finally feel like I was the center of attention, just once. Mom baked a cake. Dad hung some balloons. It was supposed to be my day. But halfway through, Lauren came downstairs in her new pink dress and twirled for everyone. She wasn't even invited to my circle of friends, but somehow every kid's eyes shifted to her. She stole the spotlight so naturally that even my parents clapped, snapping photos of her while my cake sat on the table, candles melting. By the end of the night, no one remembered to sing happy birthday. A mom apologized the next day, but even then her words stung. You know how Lauren is, honey. She just shines. Don't take it personally. But I did, every single time. By high school, the gap only grew. Lauren became the cheerleader, the prom queen, the girl every guy wanted to date. I worked part-time jobs, stayed late in the library, and kept my head down. It wasn't that I didn't want to shine. I just learned that if I tried, Lauren would snatch the light anyway, and I'd be left with nothing but her shadow. Still, Some small part of me clung to the hope that she was my sister first, a rival second. I wanted to believe that beneath the vanity, beneath the cutting remarks, there was still the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and whisper that she was scared of the thunder. But as we grew older, the whispers changed. They turned into daggers delivered with a smile. Claire, that dress is practical, she'd say at family dinners, smirking while she twirled her hair. Or, you're so dependable. Guys like girls who take care of things, not girls they actually have fun with. Every word chipped away at me. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. She could have the spotlight, the compliments, the flings with boys who wouldn't even remember her name a year later. Because I had something she didn't, quiet strength. That belief held me together until Daniel came into my life. I met him at a conference my company sent me to. He was charming, ambitious, but most importantly, he saw me, really saw me. When we talked, he leaned in like every word mattered. When I laughed, his eyes lit up. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the afterthought. I wasn't the dependable older sister standing on the sidelines. I was radiant, alive, cherished. The first time I brought him home, I should have known trouble was coming. Lauren was waiting at the door, her smile sugary, sweet, her eyes glinting with curiosity. She hugged him just a little too long, her hand lingering on his arm as she said, "So you're Daniel? Claire's told us so much about you." She said it like she was tasting the name on her tongue. At dinner that night, she laughed louder than anyone at his jokes, even the corny ones. She brushed her hair back and leaned forward every time he spoke, her body language screaming flirtation. And of course, my parents noticed, but not the way they should have. "Isn't it nice to see Lauren and Daniel getting along?" Mom whispered to me in the kitchen, as if that was the priority. Not me, not my happiness, but how well my sister clicked with the man I loved. I forced a smile, but inside I burned. As Daniel and I grew closer, Lauren's comments became sharper, like tiny needles hidden in silk. "He's handsome, Claire. Almost too handsome for you." Or, "Don't get too comfortable. Men like him don't usually settle." I brushed it off, told myself she was just being her usual cruel self. But somewhere deep down, I felt the cracks forming. There was one moment I'll never forget. Daniel had surprised me with flowers at work one day, a huge bouquet that made all my coworkers swoon. When I brought them home, Lauren glanced at them and smirked. "Wow, Claire. Must have been a slow day at the flower shop. Maybe he bought the leftovers." Daniel was standing right there. He looked uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything, and that silence cut deeper than her words. Still, I clung to hope. I told myself Daniel loved me, that my sister couldn't possibly ruin this, that for once I had something she couldn't take. But Lauren's jealousy was like a slow acting poison. It seeped into every interaction, every family dinner, every holiday gathering. She would sit too close to him, brush his sleeve as she passed, whisper jokes that were meant for his ears only. And the worst part, Daniel never pushed her away. Not completely. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid. I wanted so badly to believe in my happily ever after that I ignored the warning signs until the rehearsal dinner, until I opened that door, until I saw with my own eyes what my gut had been screaming all along. And standing there, heartbroken but strangely calm, I realized something. This wasn't just about Daniel. It wasn't even just about Lauren. This was about every birthday she stole, every insult she disguised as a joke, every time my parents clapped for her while I stood in the background. This was about years of humiliation, years of being told I wasn't enough. And now, with my wedding shattered, my trust destroyed, and my sister smirking in triumph, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: Lauren thought she had won. But she hadn't seen the storm she created. Because this time, I wasn't going to let her walk away with my life in her hands. This time, I was going to make her pay. And I was going to do it in front of everyone. After the rehearsal dinner disaster, I spent the night in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling while shadows from the tree outside danced across the walls. Sleep never came. My heart ached like someone had carved it open with jagged glass, but beneath that ache was something stronger, a slow burning fire. Lauren had stolen plenty of things from me before: attention, approval, affection. But stealing Daniel, that was new. That was unforgivable. I should have called off the wedding that very night. But humiliation is a strange beast. It wraps itself around you, whispering doubts until you can't tell if you're fighting for love or fighting against shame. When morning came, Mom knocked on my door. I didn't answer, but she let herself in anyway, holding a mug of coffee like a peace offering. "Claire, honey, we need to talk." Her voice was soft, but her eyes were calculating. I knew that look. It was the same one she used when smoothing over family gossip about last night. She continued, sitting at the edge of my bed. You must understand Daniel is under a lot of stress. Weddings are overwhelming. And Lauren, well, she's always been affectionate. Don't make this into something it isn't. I nearly laughed in her face. Affectionate. He was kissing her mom. That's not affectionate. That's betrayal. She frowned as though my words were inconvenient. Don't be dramatic. You've worked so hard for this wedding. Do you really want to throw it away over one mistake? Everyone is expecting a beautiful ceremony. Think of the family. There it was again. The unspoken rule, Lauren first, appearances second, Claire last. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. If I told her I wanted to call everything off, she would spin it as my fault. The bride who overreacted. The sister who ruined her own wedding. The disappointment again. So I nodded silently, letting her believe she had convinced me. But inside the fire grew hotter. Later that day, I found Lauren in the kitchen, sipping a mimosa as though nothing had happened. She was radiant in her silk robe, hair perfectly curled, lips glossed. When she saw me, she tilted her head with mock sympathy. Sleep well, sis. I ignored her and reached for a glass of water, but she wasn't finished. Daniel told me last night that he wasn't sure you two were ready for marriage. Maybe you should think about that? Her words slid under my skin like knives. Stay away from him, Lauren, I said, my voice low, but she only smiled. Or what? I wanted to scream to claw that smug expression off her face. But instead, I set my glass down carefully, forcing control into every muscle. You'll see, I whispered and walked out before she could reply. From that moment on, the betrayal became a performance, and I was the unwilling audience. At the rehearsal brunch, Lauren glued herself to Daniel's side, her laughter echoing like nails on a chalkboard. She touched his arm every time she spoke, leaned close when he answered, and at one point, whispered something in his ear that made his face flush. Every relative noticed, but instead of calling it what it was, they chuckled approvingly. Uncle Ray clapped Daniel on the back. You're marrying into the best family, son. Those sisters, always so close, a close. The word made bile rise in my throat. Even Daniel, who once looked at me like I was his whole world, now avoided my eyes. When he did glance at me, it was with guilt. But guilt wasn't enough. He didn't stop her. He didn't push her away. And with every minute that passed, it became harder to tell if he was being seduced or if he was simply enjoying the attention. By evening, I couldn't stand it anymore. I slipped out into the garden behind the venue, desperate for air. The rose bushes glowed faintly under the string lights, and for a moment I let myself collapse onto the bench, tears spilling freely. That's when my cousin Jenna found me. She was one of the few in the family who never joined in Lauren's cruelty. Sitting beside me, she squeezed my hand. I saw them, she whispered. I saw the way Lauren looks at him. It's wrong, Claire. You don't deserve this. Her kindness broke something inside me. I leaned on her shoulder, whispering the truth I couldn't say to anyone else. She's always taken everything from me. But this time, I don't think I can survive it. Jana pulled back and looked me in the eye. Then don't survive it. Fight back. Make them regret it. Her words echoed in my chest like a promise. The next few days only deepened my humiliation. Lauren flaunted her connection with Daniel openly, and somehow the narrative shifted. Instead of people condemning her behavior, whispers began to surface about me. She's so uptight. I overheard one aunt say. Maybe Daniel feels trapped. Another whispered. And the worst, Lauren has always been the prettier one. Maybe Claire should have expected this. I wanted to scream that none of it was my fault. That my sister had stolen the man I loved right from under me. But speaking out would only make me sound desperate. And desperation was exactly what Lauren wanted to paint me as. Every night I returned to my childhood room, staring at the ceiling, remembering every moment of my life where I had been overlooked, underestimated, overshadowed. My rage grew sharper, clearer, until it stopped feeling like pain and started feeling like power. The turning point came at Sunday dinner. Dad raised his glass to toast the happy couple, his words slurring with pride. But instead of looking at me, his eyes flicked to Daniel and Lauren, sitting too close, laughing too loud, their connection undeniable. And that's when it hit me. They weren't ashamed. They weren't hiding. They believed they had already won. And maybe in the eyes of my family, they had. But I wasn't planning on letting them keep their victory. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, staring at my reflection. My eyes were red, my cheeks pale, but beneath the exhaustion was steel. I whispered to myself, no. For years, I had played the dependable daughter, the quiet sister, the shadow. But shadows can grow. Shadows can swallow everything if you let them. Lauren thought she had broken me. Daniel thought his betrayal would go unpunished. My family thought I would quietly accept my fate. They were all wrong. Because the fire inside me wasn't just burning anymore. It was blazing, demanding release. And as I dried my tears and lifted my chin, I made a silent vow I would not only survive this, I would make them regret ever underestimating me, and I would break Lauren's heart in front of every single person who once cheered for her. The night of the family dinner played on repeat in my head like a broken record. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way Lauren leaned into Daniel, the way his guilty smile didn't quite hide his enjoyment, the way Dad raised his glass as though blessing their unholy alliance. I had been humiliated in silence for too long. Lying awake in my childhood bedroom, the walls covered in old posters and faded photos, I felt like that little girl again. The one who always came second, the one who swallowed her pain while Lauren sparkled. But that girl was gone, buried, replaced by a woman who had nothing left to lose. It's funny how grief works. First it broke me, then it hardened me, then it sharpened me. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the reflection staring back. My eyes were rimmed with sleepless shadows, but there was fire there too, a new kind of fire. This ends now, I whispered to myself. No more shadows. No more silence. The first step wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, calculated. I went downstairs, where Lauren was sipping coffee at the kitchen counter. Scrolling through her phone, she looked up, smirk tugging at her lips. Rough night, sis? She asked, her tone syrupy with fake sympathy. I didn't flinch. I didn't rise to the bait. Instead, I smiled, not the brittle smile she expected, but something steadier, colder. Not at all. I was just thinking about the wedding, I said softly. It's going to be unforgettable. For the first time in days, I saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty. She wasn't sure what I meant. And that was good. I wanted her off balance. Planning revenge wasn't something I rushed into. I knew better. Lauren thrived on chaos, on quick wins, on impulsive cruelty. If I was going to bring her down, it couldn't be messy. It had to be flawless. I started with observation. For the next week, I watched. I noted every time she touched Daniel's arm, every secretive glance, every whispered word. I cataloged the way my parents excused her behavior, the way relatives turned blind eyes. I even noted how Daniel's posture shifted when she entered the room, how guilt bent his shoulders, but temptation tugged him closer anyway. Every detail mattered. Every weakness would become a weapon. At night, I filled notebooks with thoughts, scribbles, and plans. My pen scratched across the paper like a blade exposure. They need to be seen for what they are. Timing. The bigger the audience, the greater the fall. Control. I can't let emotion ruin execution. Calm is power. I wasn't just planning revenge, I was building a stage. And when the curtain rose, Lauren wouldn't be the star, she would be the fool. One evening, as I sat in the garden with my cousin Jenna, I tested the waters. You ever notice how everyone just lets Lauren get away with things? I asked, trying to sound casual. Jenna snorted. Notice. Claire, it's the family's favorite pastime. But why are you asking now? I hesitated, then leaned closer. Because I'm done letting it happen. I want her to feel what it's like to be humiliated. I want her to break. Jenna studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Good. About time. But be careful, Claire. She'll play dirty. She always does. I smiled, but it wasn't the soft smile I used to wear. It was sharper now. That's why I'm not going to play her game. I'm going to make my own. The turning point came when I overheard Lauren on the phone one night. She was in the living room, giggling into the receiver, her voice low but not low enough. Yes, babe, she whispered. Of course I'll meet you tomorrow. Claire has no idea. I froze in the hallway, blood roaring in my ears. She wasn't just flirting with Daniel anymore. She was meeting him in secret. My fists clenched, but instead of barging in, I stayed still. Listened. Her words were daggers. She's so naive. Honestly, I don't even know why he was with her in the first place. But don't worry, soon she'll be out of the picture completely. The smirk in her tone was unmistakable. When she hung up, I crept back upstairs, my mind whirling. It was one thing to steal glances, another to whisper poison. But meeting him in secret, that was proof I could use. The old me might have confronted her, screamed, demanded answers. But the new me knew better. I didn't need her to admit anything. I just needed her to hang herself with her own rope. Over the next few days, I began laying traps, subtle ones. I asked Daniel casual questions, watching his eyes dart nervously. So, where were you yesterday afternoon? Oh, just running errands, he'd mutter, avoiding my gaze. I asked Lauren about her plans, and she would smile sweetly, her lies flowing like honey. Just shopping, sis. You know me. But what they didn't know was that I had already hired a photographer, not a professional. Just a local college student I found through a friend, someone eager to make extra cash. Their job was simple: follow Lauren when she left the house, document everything, and it didn't take long. Within 3 days, I had photos of her slipping into a cafe with Daniel, her hand brushing his, their heads leaning close across the table. One photo even captured the moment his lips brushed hers. When I saw the images, my heart twisted, but I didn't cry, not anymore. I smiled, because now I had evidence. Now I had power. But revenge wasn't just about catching them. It was about when and how I revealed the truth. I wanted Lauren to feel the ground crumble beneath her feet. I wanted Daniel to choke on his betrayal. I wanted my family, the same people who had ignored me for years, to see the golden child for what she really was: the perfect stage, the wedding itself. The thought sent shivers down my spine. It was poetic. The very day meant to unite us would be the day I tore everything apart. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies. Jenna was the first. When I showed her the photos, her eyes widened. Oh my God, Claire, this is perfect. You're really going to do it? Yes, I said, my voice steady, but not yet. Timing is everything. She grinned, squeezing my hand. Then count me in. Whatever you need, I'm there. With Jenna on my side, I felt stronger. Not just a victim clawing for justice, but a woman orchestrating her own triumph. In the days leading up to the wedding, I played my role flawlessly. I smiled at Daniel, acted gracious with Lauren, nodded when my parents prattled on about how lucky I was. They thought I was broken, defeated, maybe even in denial. And that was exactly what I wanted them to think. Because while they admired Lauren's charm and Daniel's fake devotion, I was building my masterpiece. Every detail of the wedding, the seating chart, the slideshow, even the music, became a tool in my hands. I arranged for the photographer to deliver me the files in secret. I rehearsed my speech, not the vows I would never say, but the words that would shatter their illusion. I imagined the gasps, the silence, the way Lauren's face would crumble when her carefully curated image collapsed. For the first time in my life, I felt powerful, and with every passing day, the fear in me melted into determination. I wasn't just planning revenge, I was becoming it. The night before the wedding, Lauren cornered me in the hallway. Her eyes glittered, her lips curled into that same smug smile. Ready for tomorrow, sis. You must be nervous. I looked at her, really looked at her. The girl who had stolen everything from me, who had basked in the glow of being first while I suffocated in second place, and instead of fear, I felt something else: pity. You have no idea how ready I am, I whispered. Her smile faltered, just for a second. Then she laughed it off and walked away, heels clicking against the floor. But that tiny flicker of doubt in her eyes told me something important. She didn't feel as untouchable as she pretended. And tomorrow, I would prove she wasn't. That night, I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, because tomorrow wasn't my wedding day anymore. It was my reckoning. And when the sun rose, I was ready to become the storm that would wash her world away. The morning of the wedding dawned with cruel perfection. The sky was cloudless, the air warm but not stifling, and the birds outside my window sang as if mocking me. It should have been the happiest day of my life, the day I became a wife, the day my family gathered to celebrate love. Instead, it was the day I would burn everything to the ground. I rose early, showered, and slipped into the satin robe laid out for me. My hands were steady as I applied my makeup, each brushstroke deliberate. I wasn't preparing to be a bride. I was preparing for war. When I walked downstairs, my mother gasped at my appearance. Claire, you look beautiful, she said, eyes shining with pride that felt hollow now. She fussed with my hair, smoothing strands into place, while Lauren hovered nearby in a pastel dress that hugged her curves a little too perfectly for a maid of honor. She smirked at me over her mimosa glass, her eyes glinting like knives. Big day, sis, she said, voice laced with mock sweetness. Hope you're ready. I met her gaze evenly. Oh, I'm ready. She laughed, dismissing me, turning her attention back to Daniel, who had just arrived in his tailored suit. My stomach twisted at the sight of him. The man I once believed was my forever. He looked handsome, polished, but I saw the guilt in the tightness of his smile, the way his eyes avoided mine. I didn't flinch. Not anymore. The ceremony was held at a vineyard estate my parents had rented, a sprawling property with rows of grapevines rolling into the distance, and a reception hall glittering with chandeliers. Guests arrived in droves, filling the pews with chatter and laughter. Relatives hugged, friends gossiped, cameras flashed. From the outside, it looked like perfection, but perfection was about to unravel. As I stood in the bridal suit, veil draped over my head, Jenna slipped in quietly. She carried a small flash drive in her hand and pressed it into mine. "Everything's ready," she whispered. Relief flooded me. The photographer had delivered. The evidence was loaded, the slideshow programmed, the trap set. "Thank you," I whispered back, my heart pounding. She squeezed my hand, her eyes fierce. "Make them pay." When the ceremony began, I walked down the aisle to the soft swell of strings, every eye on me. But I wasn't nervous. I wasn't a trembling bride. I was calm, calculating. A storm in silk. Daniel stood at the altar, shifting uneasily. Lauren stood to his side, smiling like a cat who had already licked the cream. My parents watched from the front row, their faces glowing with pride. They thought this was the moment I'd finally step into the role they had written for me. The dutiful wife, the dependable daughter. They had no idea. The vows began. Daniel took my hands, his voice shaking slightly as he recited the promises we had written. His words felt like ashes in my ears. He spoke of love, fidelity, partnership, words he had already broken with my sister. When it was my turn, I didn't repeat the vows. I took a deep breath, lifted my chin, and began to speak. Family, love, trust. My voice carried through the hall, steady and clear. These are the foundations of marriage, the foundations of life, and without them everything crumbles. A murmurs rippled through the crowd, confusion flickering across Daniel's face. Lauren frowned, shifting uncomfortably. "For years," I continued, "I have lived in shadows. I've been the dependable one, the invisible one. While others took the spotlight, I carried the weight. I accepted the cruelty, the dismissals, the betrayals. Until now." A gasps echoed. My mother's brow furrowed, my father leaned forward. Lauren's lips pressed into a thin line. I gestured toward the back where Jenna stood ready. "Today is not just a wedding. Today is the truth." The lights dimmed. The screen behind us flickered to life. At first, guests expected a sweet slideshow of childhood photos, the kind every wedding includes. And it began that way. Pictures of me and Daniel smiling at dinners, laughing at parks, holding hands. The crowd cooed, smiled, clapped softly. Then the images shifted. A photo of Lauren and Daniel at the cafe, their heads close. Another of his hand brushing hers. Another, unmistakable, of his lips pressed against hers. The room went silent. A gasp tore through the hall as whispers erupted like wildfire. Eyes darted between me, Daniel, and Lauren. My stomach churned, but I kept my gaze fixed, unflinching. Daniel's face drained of color. "Claire, he stammered, stepping forward. But I cut him off. "Save it. You've already said enough." To her, Lauren's smirk had vanished, replaced by panic. She stood frozen, her eyes wide as guests turned to glare at her. My parents gaped, mouths opening and closing without words. I turned back to the crowd, my voice steady. "This is what betrayal looks like. This is what it feels like to be stabbed in the back by the people who are supposed to love you most. My sister, my fiancé. Together, behind my back." Gasps grew louder. Some guests shaking their heads, others glaring openly at Lauren and Daniel. I took off my veil and tossed it aside. This was supposed to be my wedding. But instead, it's their trial. Daniel reached for me, desperation in his eyes. "Claire, please, it was a mistake. I love you." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You love yourself, and you love her. But you don't love me. Not enough to be faithful, not enough to be honest." Lauren found her voice then, her tone sharp. "You don't understand, Claire." He came to me. He said he wasn't sure about you. "Hey, enough." I snapped, my voice ringing through the hall. "You've taken everything from me my whole life. The spotlight, the praise, the love. But not this. Not anymore." The room was dead silent, every guest watching as Lauren's mask cracked, her confidence crumbling. She sputtered, trying to recover, but the damage was done. The golden child had been exposed. I turned back to the officiant. "There will be no wedding today." Gasps, whispers. Some people clapped quietly, others shook their heads in shock. I faced Daniel one last time. "You chose her, so live with that choice. But don't expect me to stand here and pretend to be blind." Then I faced Lauren, letting my words cut like a blade. "Congratulations, sister, you finally won. But in the process, you've lost everything." With that, I walked down the aisle alone, my heels striking against the floor like thunder. The murmurs followed me, the whispers of betrayal, the gasps of disbelief. Behind me, Daniel called my name. Lauren shouted protests. My parents begged me to stop. I didn't. Outside, the sun blazed bright, the vineyard stretching endlessly before me. For the first time in years, I felt free, not just from Daniel, not just from Lauren, but from the chains of being second best. Because in exposing them, I had reclaimed myself. And as the doors shut behind me, I knew this wasn't just the end of a wedding, it was the beginning of my freedom. The moment the heavy oak doors closed behind me, muffling the chaos inside, I drew in a long breath of vineyard air. The sweet tang of grapes, the faint perfume of roses along the walkway, the sharp sting of sunlight in my eyes, it all felt cleansing. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking in Lauren's shadow. For the first time, I had chosen myself. I walked slowly down the path, each step deliberate, my heels crunching against the gravel. Behind me, the muffled roar of voices continued confusion, anger, whispers turning into accusations. But I didn't stop. Not until I reached the far end of the property, where the vines swayed in the breeze and silence wrapped around me like a shield. For a moment, I just stood there, staring out over the endless rows. I should have been devastated, my fiancé gone, my family splintered, my wedding day in ruins. But instead, I felt something unexpected, relief. The weight I had carried for years, the weight of being overlooked, dismissed, humiliated, had fallen away. In exposing Lauren and Daniel, I had cut the cord that bound me to their betrayal. Still, freedom doesn't come without consequences. By the time I returned to the reception hall, the scene inside was pure carnage. Guests clustered in small groups, whispering fiercely, eyes darting toward the front where Daniel and Lauren sat, pale and trembling. My parents hovered nearby, faces drained of color. The once celebratory air had curdled into something bitter, heavy, and unforgettable. As soon as I stepped inside, all eyes turned to me, for a heartbeat silence stretched, thick, expectant. Then voices rose again, louder this time, buzzing like angry bees. My mother rushed to me, her hands fluttering. Claire, what have you done? Do you realize what people will say? You've embarrassed us in front of everyone. I laughed, but it was sharp. Embarrassed you? No, Mom. Lauren and Daniel did that. I just showed the truth. Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes glistening with anger and something else. Fear. My father stepped forward, his tone heavy with disappointment. This could have been handled privately. Why would you destroy everything like this? I stared at him, years of suppressed fury rising. Because you never listened to me. Because you never believed me. Because every time she hurt me, you turned away. Well, now you can't turn away. Now the whole world has seen it. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Silence was, as always, his refuge. I turned then, facing Lauren. My sister sat frozen, her mascara smudge, her lips trembling. For once, the golden child wasn't glowing, she was wilting. Claire, she whispered, her voice cracking. Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far. A bitter laugh escaped me. Didn't mean for it to go this far. You kissed my fiancé. You mocked me. You plotted behind my back. Don't pretend this was an accident. Her eyes darted wildly around the room, seeking allies. But the faces staring back weren't sympathetic. They were cold, disbelieving, disgusted. The applause she had always taken for granted was gone, replaced by silence heavy as stone. And Daniel, poor, pitiful Daniel, sat slumped beside her, his tie loosened, sweat dampening his forehead. He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. Claire, please, give me another chance. I made a mistake. Don't throw us away like this. Us, I repeated, my voice icy. There was never an us. There was me. And there was you waiting for someone sheenier to come along. You don't get another chance. Not with me. The words cut him down, and I watched as his shoulders sagged, his lips pressed tight. He had lost control, lost the illusion, lost me. The guests began to leave soon after. Some muttered sympathy in my direction, others shook their heads in disbelief. Still others cast scathing glances at Lauren and Daniel. One aunt hugged me tightly, whispering, "You were brave, dear. Don't ever let them tell you otherwise." It struck me then that not everyone had been blind. Some had seen the cracks, the favoritism, the betrayal. They just hadn't dared to speak. And maybe, just maybe, my choice had given them permission to stop pretending too. When the hall finally emptied, only family remained. My parents still reeling. Lauren slumped in a chair, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Daniel pacing, muttering curses under his breath. I stood tall in the center of the room, my gown shimmering under the fading chandelier light, and I spoke the truth that had lived inside me for years. This isn't about Daniel. It isn't even about the wedding. This is about every time you dismissed me, every time you called me dramatic, every time you told me to be more like her. Well, here she is. This is who she is. And now everyone knows it. My mother started to cry, but I didn't feel sorry. My father rubbed his forehead, defeated. Lauren finally broke, her voice cracking into sobs. I didn't mean it, Claire. I was jealous. You always had things I didn't. The absurdity of her words hit me like a slap. Jealous, you had everything? Their love, their praise, the spotlight. And still, it wasn't enough. You had to take mine too. She crumbled then, sobbing into her hands. For the first time in my life, I saw her not as the untouchable golden child, but as something smaller, weaker. And I realized I no longer needed her approval. I no longer needed any of them. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was swift. Daniel tried calling me, texting me, begging for forgiveness. I blocked his number. He became the subject of workplace gossip, his betrayal spreading like wildfire. The promotion he'd been eyeing slipped away, his reputation tarnished. Lauren wasn't spared either. Her golden child image shattered overnight. Relatives whispered behind her back, neighbors stopped praising her, friends drifted away. She had become infamous. The sister who stole a fiance, the woman exposed in front of everyone. For someone who thrived on admiration, the silence was unbearable. As for my parents, they struggled with the shift. For so long, they had invested in Lauren's perfection, ignoring my pain. Now, confronted with the truth, they didn't know where to turn. They called me often, trying to mend fences, but I kept my distance. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't eager either. I needed space, I needed freedom. And freedom is exactly what I found. I moved to a new city, rented a small apartment with sunlight streaming through the windows, and started fresh. No shadows, no comparisons, no Lauren. I poured myself into my work, into hobbies I had long ignored, into friendships that nourished me instead of draining me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the dependable one. I wasn't the boring sister. I was Claire, whole, enough. Some nights I would sit by my window sipping tea, watching the city lights shimmer. I'd think about Daniel, about Lauren, about the girl I used to be, the one who bent under everyone's weight. And I would whisper to myself, she's gone, she's not coming back, because the woman I had become wasn't afraid anymore. The irony is, my revenge wasn't about destroying them. It wasn't even about humiliation. Though seeing Lauren's face crumble, hearing the gasps, watching Daniel's desperation, was satisfying in ways I can't deny. My revenge was about reclaiming myself, about tearing down the chains they had built around me and walking away free. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest victory of all. The story doesn't end with a wedding, it ends with a reckoning. With a woman who learned that sometimes the only way to survive betrayal is to stop playing the victim and start writing your own ending, and mine. Mine was written in fire.